Look at the paper in your wallet. You believe it holds value. You trade your time, your energy, your life for it. But what you are holding is a ghost, a remnant of a reality that was quietly assassinated decades ago, the late 1960s. The American empire is bleeding. On one side of the globe, the jungles of Vietnam consume billions in war machinery. At home, the sprawling ambition of the Great Society demands endless funding. The ledger is glowing red. Global accounting is unforgiving. The balance of payments deficit spirals out of control. Washington is printing dollars to fund its dual wars, but those dollars are leaking across borders. And foreign central banks are watching the numbers with growing suspicion. Under the surface of the global economy lies the ultimate collateral, gold. For every dollar printed, a physical equivalent is supposed to sit in American vaults. But the world realizes the United States is writing checks its gold reserves can no longer cash. This was the promise of Bretton Woods, an elegant post-war agreement that pegged all global currencies to the US dollar and the dollar to gold. It was the anchor of human commerce. But the anchor chain is stretching, fraying, under the weight of geopolitical ambition. The quiet panic begins. Nations like France refuse to hold depreciating American paper. They demand physical delivery. Ships are loaded with gold bullion, draining the vaults of New York. Is a slow, silent run on the global bank. The math becomes impossible. If the bleeding continues, the United States will be entirely depleted of its sovereign wealth. A choice must be made. Save the empire's spending power, or honor the golden rule. The pressure reaches terminal velocity in the summer of 1971. August 13th, President Richard Nixon gathers his economic architects in secret. There is no public debate, no global summit. A small circle of men are about to fundamentally rewrite the definition of money for every human being on Earth. On August 15th, Nixon steps before the cameras. With a few carefully chosen words, he unilaterally suspends the convertibility of the dollar into gold. The window slams shut. The anchor is severed. The physical constraint on money is abolished forever. Global markets suffer an immediate, violent shock. The Bretton Woods system is dead. Foreign governments scramble, suddenly holding billions in paper that is backed by absolutely nothing but the decree of a government. The era of pure fiat has begun. The anchor is gone, and the ships are adrift. Suddenly, foreign governments have no metric to value their own currencies. The dollar fluctuates wildly. The necessity of floating exchange rates is born not out of strategy, but out of sheer, unadulterated panic. The immediate aftermath brings a decade of relentless pain. The removal of the gold standard unleashes a beast that had been caged since the Great Depression, unyielding inflation. The purchasing power of the working class begins to evaporate before their very eyes. You must understand the core mechanism of this shift. Before 1971, capital flows were bound by the physical velocity and supply of gold. You could only print what you could back up. Money creation was tethered to the unyielding reality of the earth. After 1971, the printing press is completely unchained. Credit expansion is no longer constrained by geology or physical assets. It becomes constrained only by the whims of central bank policy and the public's sheer tolerance for endless debt. The risk is masterfully redistributed. Governments no longer have to defend a gold peg or face immediate ruin for overspending. Instead, the cost of their infinite budgets is quietly passed to the broader market, hidden within the invisible compounding tax of currency inflation. Persistent inflation is permanently normalized. It transforms from an economic anomaly, a symptom of a sick system, into a structural necessity. The financial architecture now requires your money to lose value over time, forcing you to spend, to borrow, to constantly outrun the devaluation. Long-term, this single, quiet decision gives birth to the modern financialization of the global economy. The engine of human wealth generation fundamentally shifts. It moves away from the sweaty floors of industrial production and into the sterile, abstract towers of asset management. The people making things are no longer the ones making the real money. Wealth is now generated through complex credit cycles, derivatives, and the manipulation of debt. The financial sector, once a servant to industry, becomes the undisputed master of the real economy. Today, the entirety of global trade operates on this grand illusion. Central bank quantitative easing, massive sovereign debt structures, the very concept of money, all of it functions strictly on the premise established in that secret meeting in the woods in 1971. We live in a world built on a promise that was already broken half a century ago. You work for a currency that can be infinitely diluted at the press of a button. The game was changed overnight, and most people never even realized the rules were rewritten. There is a name for this silent theft: the Cantillon Effect. When new money is printed, it does not distribute evenly. It flows first to the central banks, the massive corporations, the financial elite. They spend it while prices are still low. By the time that newly printed money trickles down to your paycheck, the cost of living has already adjusted upward. The groceries, the fuel, the rent, they have all absorbed the inflation. You are running a marathon on a treadmill that only speeds up. Generations before 1971 understood a different reality. They could store the fruits of their labor in a simple savings account, trusting the currency to hold its purchasing power. Today, storing wealth in pure cash is a guaranteed mathematical loss. The system actively punishes prudence. To simply survive, to outpace the invisible tax of inflation, you are forced into the financial casino. You must become a speculator. You must buy equities, real estate, derivatives, just to keep your head above water. This is why a simple home has become fundamentally unaffordable. Houses stopped being mere shelter. Under a fiat system, they transformed into financial vaults, concrete safety deposit boxes where the wealthy park their capital to protect it from depreciating paper money. The middle class is being systematically hollowed out. The gap between those who own hard assets and those who trade their hours for a wage is no longer a divide. It is an unbridgeable canyon, expanding with every basis point of credit creation. To sustain this illusion, the debt cycle must constantly expand. The global economy is now a beast that feeds exclusively on new credit. If the borrowing stops, if the numbers stop going up, the entire architecture collapses under its own engineered weight. The financial crises that have battered the modern world, the dot-com crash, the devastation of 2008, the manic printing of 2020, these are not unpredictable accidents. They are the mathematical features of a system completely detached from reality. During every collapse, the architects of the system present the same solution. They lower the rates. They print more paper. They inflate the balloon further, kicking the inevitable reckoning down the road for the next generation to suffer. But a fiat system always has a terminal destination. You cannot engineer infinite growth on a finite planet, and you cannot permanently substitute physical value with political promises. The mathematics always demand a reckoning. The decoupling of 1971 didn't just change the economy, it changed the human psyche. When money has no floor, the future has no certainty. Time, preference shifts. We stop building for the next century and start living for the next quarter. We become a society of the now because tomorrow's dollar is already dying. Look at the skyscrapers of our modern cities. They are no longer monuments to production. They are monuments to the movement of data. In a fiat world, the highest rewards go to those closest to the fountain of credit, the bankers and the brokers, not the makers. This systemic shift created a new class of zombie corporations. Companies that produce nothing of value, kept alive only by cheap debt and the constant infusion of newly printed liquidity. They are the hollowed-out shells of an economy that has forgotten how to grow organically. The social fabric tears at the seams. When the cost of survival rises faster than the value of work, resentment becomes the primary export. Political polarization isn't just a clash of ideas. It's the friction of a population realizing their labor is being harvested by a ghost in the machine. We are told that inflation is a natural law, like gravity. It isn't. It is a policy. It is a choice made by those who benefit from the dilution of your life's work. The Nixon Shock was not a temporary measure to stabilize the dollar. It was the final victory of the state over the market. The gold standard was a chain on the government's power. It forced honesty. It demanded that if a nation wanted to spend, it had to produce. By breaking that chain, we entered the era of the forever war and the forever deficit, because the cost is no longer felt today. It is stolen from tomorrow. As the debt-to-GDP ratios across the globe climb to heights never before seen in human history, the endgame draws near. You cannot solve a debt crisis with more debt. You cannot cure a poison with a higher dosage. The ceiling is approaching, and there is nowhere left to hide. The 1971 decision was the moment we traded the truth for a comfortable lie. We traded the hard reality of gold for the soft convenience of credit. But the lie is getting harder to maintain. The cracks are appearing in the supply chains, the housing markets, and the very trust that holds society together. The question is no longer if the system will reset, but when. And when it does, what will you hold? Will you hold the paper promises of a bankrupt era, or will you hold something that the earth itself recognizes as value? History is the only reliable witness, and it is screaming its warning. Nixon's decision detached money from reality, but reality has a way of returning, uninvited and unforgiving. The ghost of 1971 is still with us, waiting for the moment the ink finally runs dry. The normalization of debt has fundamentally altered the family structure. In the pre-1971 world, a single income could often sustain a household, purchase a home, and secure a future. Today, the dual income trap is a direct byproduct of a currency that loses value faster than a single person can earn it. As the currency debases, the social contract is rewritten in favor of the debtor. Governments, being the largest debtors in history, have a vested interest in ensuring your savings lose value. It is the only way they can pay back trillions in loans with cheaper dollars in the future. The global reserve status of the dollar is the final pillar. Because the world needs dollars to buy oil and settle trade, the United States has been able to export its inflation to other nations. But this exorbitant privilege is now being challenged as nations look for an exit from the fiat trap. We are seeing the rise of parallel systems. From decentralized digital assets to the return of gold-backed trade settlements, the world is frantically searching for a new anchor. The 1971 experiment is entering its final, most volatile phase, the search for a replacement. Central Bank Digital Currencies, CBDCs, are the state's answer to the crumbling fiat system. It is the ultimate evolution of the 1971 decision, a currency that isn't just detached from gold, but is fully programmable, traceable, and controlled at the source. If the gold standard was about freedom and fiat was about credit, the coming era is about surveillance. Without the physical restraint of gold, the only thing left to back a currency is the total compliance of the population. The ledger is no longer in the vault. It is in the cloud. The lesson of history is that no fiat currency has ever survived indefinitely. They all eventually return to their intrinsic value, zero. The 55-year detour we have taken since 1971 is a mere heartbeat in the grand timeline of human civilization. Wealth is never truly destroyed. It is only transferred. In the coming decades, we will witness the greatest transfer of wealth in human history, from those who believe in the ghost of 1971 to those who understand the immutable laws of math and scarcity. The decision that detached money from reality was a heist performed in plain sight. It was a bet that the world would never wake up. But as the cost of the lie becomes unbearable, the awakening is no longer optional. It is a survival instinct. You now know the origin of the ghost in your wallet. The anchor was cut, the ship is sinking, and the lifeboats are being lowered. The question is, are you still waiting for the captain to tell you the truth? They won't teach you this in school. They won't frame it this clearly on television. But history leaves fingerprints everywhere. And tell me, have you started seeing them too? If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers, and I'll show you where to look.